And our last speaker is Hayley Alderson from UK. And the talk will be about identifying and supporting children and families to reduce alcohol harm. And the floor is yours.
Thank you.
It must be somewhere here. Yeah,
oh,
perfect.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. As I've just been introduced, Hayley Alderson. I'm from the northeast of England, and I'm here to talk about the Bottled Up project on behalf of the research team, which, as you can see on screen, included colleagues Deborah Smart, Cassie Muir, and Ruth McGovern. So, that writing's quite small. I don't need to focus on this lots, as we've talked about for the last couple of days. Everyone in the room is very well aware about the impact of parental alcohol misuse. When I'm talking about it in this presentation, I'm thinking of problematic use in terms of parents or carers who are dependent on or are regularly or excessively using alcohol, which is resulting in some level of physical, mental health and or social problems. And whilst we're aware that not all children of substance misusing parents will experience significant harm, they are obviously at greater risks of having adverse outcomes. We know there's lots of short-term outcomes, such as kind of neglect, I say that are quite prevalent in younger children, but there's also evidence that shows that there is impact of that intergenerational patterns of substance misuse and can impact on individuals' mental health, unemployment, and their own offending behaviour, as we've heard in multiple presentations today. And we know that that in turn can have substantial cost to the economy, with the burden of addressing harms coming in terms of people needing to access multiple agencies and different departments. But when we think of the impact on the family, we're aware that individuals and affected others often have a caring responsibility, and it falls on family members. The impact of parental alcohol use are not just experienced by children whose parents drink to harmful levels either, and obviously there is, as the slide shows, impact on low-level parental drinking as well, with some evidence showing that results of parents drinking even at lower levels results in children feeling either embarrassed by the parents' alcohol misuse, feeling worried or concerned when they see behaviour that isn't usual for them. In one particular study, 12% of children said that their parents paid them less attention because of their alcohol use, and 15% stated that their bedtime routine and educational routines were impacted or disrupted because of parents being intoxicated. There's also evidence, excuse me, that indicates that children and young people, as we touched upon in their presentation before, are more likely to drink themselves, are more likely to drink frequently, and to drink in excess if they are regularly exposed to a close family member who's drinking excessively or they're seen intoxicated. So because of these, or in response to the known impact of parental substance misuse, I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about what we've called here the bottled up approach. And this is an approach that one local authority developed in response to the known impact on parents and their families. And it was developed, as you can see, as a multi-component approach to support families. As part of the approach, there was an adult alcohol worker that was there to support the parents who misuse alcohol. And they decided that they were going to provide support from hazardous, harmful, and dependent levels, which was different from more of the specialist organisations that would only take parents if they hit a certain threshold. This meant that support obviously could be accessed at a much lower threshold than other services that were currently available at the time. They also seconded a child and adolescent mental health support worker into the service to support children of alcohol misusing parents regarding their own emotional and mental well-being needs. Again, this was done purposefully because there was long waiting lists for young people to access mental health support, so they felt if they seconded a worker into their team, it would give much faster responses to young people. They also seconded in a young carers worker to support young people that were undertaking caring responsibilities as a direct result of a parent misusing alcohol. They delivered the craft intervention, which has already been spoken about at length throughout the conference, And they had a parental conflict intervention as well, which would support the couples to work through their parenting relationship to reduce any conflict, which obviously was seen as beneficial to the child. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is the methods that we used to evaluate this project. It was a single-site evaluation of the Bottled Up project. It was a naturalistic experiment, and we used a mixed methods approach, which undertook quantitative methods and qualitative methods. For the quantitative methods, we drew on routine data that was collected regarding the number of children and adults that had accessed the service. And we also used multiple quantitative tools, such as the audit to assess alcohol use. And we also used the short Warwick-Edinburgh mental wellbeing scale and the EQ 5D5L to look at parental mental health and wellbeing. And for the young people, we used the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. The quantitative tools were completed by the Bottled Up workers, and they were completed within the first and the final session with the workers to see if there'd been kind of any improvements or what improvements had been made throughout the time of working with them. And the qualitative methods we used were interviews and focus groups, and that's what I'm just going to spend the next few minutes talking about. So with regards to the qualitative interviews, we interviewed professional participants, which included all of the specialists that were on the slide a moment ago, so the mental health workers, the young carers workers, but also professionals that were in a strategic role that were overseeing this approach, and people that worked within the children's social care team, so the team that spanned around this particular model. We spoke to alcohol misusing parents, 13 of them, 5 affected adult members, and 9 affected children. And as you can see here, this just gives a brief oversight of referrals into the project. So it was a small-scale project, but to help contextualise this, these were the figures of individuals that accessed it over a 2-year period. You can see there that there was 105 referrals that were made into the project, and of those, 85 adults engaged with support. The demographics of the parents that engaged with support were 33 were male and 52 were female, and the age range of parents was between 19 and 55 years of age. The demographics of the young people, so there's 159 referrals that were made into the service, and as you can see, 81% engaged in some level of support. Of those, 65 completed work with the CAMS worker, the children and adolescent mental health worker. The average length of the intervention or the support that they engaged in was 9 months. And of those 65 young people engaging with CAMS, 39 were female, 26 were male, and the age range was between 6 and 19 years. Of those 65 young people that engaged in that support, 21 of them had parents that were simultaneously receiving support for their own alcohol use or receiving support as an affected family member. Of the 16 young people that worked with the young carers worker, as you can see, the average length of the intervention was smaller, so it's 4 months. This was partly because there was a specialist young carers service that was available, so then onwards referrals were made for them. But of the young people who linked in with the young carers worker, 9 were female, 7 were male, and the age of the young people ranged from between 9 to 15 years of age. But when we actually started exploring the implementation of this new approach, as you can see on screen, professional participants felt that they didn't actually have long enough to plan and embed the approach as they would like to. They reported that they felt they needed a long period of time to enable further work to be done to help professionals and colleagues come along on the journey with them of how differently they felt they were trying to work. They felt it would have been beneficial to have ongoing collaboration, which would enable them to provide additional support to workers as they transitioned into this kind of multi-agency way of working. And you can see that obviously by Professional 4, who talks about having a short lead-in time and felt that people were being asked to work in quite a different way, and that had potentially a detrimental effect on families because they weren't working as collaboratively as they should have been or they could have been. There was an individual that was brought into post as a direct result of that feedback who went into a coordinator role. And once they were in role and they felt that the communication improved, and it helped everybody within the local authority understand what Bottled Up was hoping to achieve, and it helped alleviate some of those initial challenges, which therefore was felt to improve the impact of the Bottled Up project on family members. But as you would expect, by purposefully choosing multiple different perspectives, they were trying to focus on the family approach. And as you can see here, this was seen as beneficial. So Professional 6 is obviously saying, we're seeing whole families together. They talked about having enhanced pathways into support. They felt that this was really positive in terms of offering more flexibility to work autonomously in the community. And it really helped by going into the family's home to see how families interacted with each other and to see what kind of children, or the family setting that children were living in. It also, professionals felt it helped give them more contextual information. There was also recognition, as you can see by Professional 5, that each member of the family was offered support in their own right. And even if some family members decided to decline that offer, others could still access the intervention. And that could either be at the same time, or sometimes it was quite staggered and people would access it at different times. But as you can see by the young person's quote on there, she did access support and she found it really useful, but for her, it was too late in the journey. So she talked about it being important to receive support at the right time. So I think there was something really important about not seeing the family as a unit and just being offered it all simultaneously, but seeing how they could change the way that they reached young people. One of the things when they were thinking of the family approach was they decided as a team to record all interactions with the family on the same local authority system. They felt that this was beneficial as it helped all professionals to see the information on one system to see if support had been offered. And they could also clearly see whether the offer of support had been accepted or declined, or what work had already been provided. So when we think about the service delivery, I've already touched upon this, but the way that the Bottled Up approach worked was slightly different. So previously, people had to go into an agency or be seen within a professional environment. The Bottled Up team had flexibility to do home or community visits, and this was welcomed. It was also suggested that it was preferred by multiple family members who stated that they don't feel they'd have been able to access the support if it was in a specialist alcohol service, as they actually felt that that would be quite intimidating for them due to being associated with other problematic use that they didn't feel able to support. The Bottled Up approach was extremely flexible in terms of setting up appointments and engaging with participants, as I say, in an environment that was suitable for them or that they preferred. They could work around individuals' work schedules, childcare, and schooling. And in relation to the timeframes of the Bottled Up programme, they reported that the frequency and number of sessions varied quite significantly, with some visits taking place weekly, fortnightly, or even on a monthly basis, where other individuals had 12 to 15 sessions within a very short space of time. So it was really responsive to each individual's needs. But if we think about the core outcomes and the onward referrals, due to the way that it worked, it was seen as a very holistic way of working and the ability to support, as I've already said, multiple family members. And this was seen to be really beneficial. As you can see by the quotes that are on the screen right now, there was many different core outcomes that were achieved, inclusive of accessing specialist services such as rehab, as shown on the screen, or detox. But also participants spoke about not feeling the need to hide anymore and feeling safer and more secure as a result of accessing Bottled Up. And some of that was because they had access or they felt that they could now go to the police if they needed alarm systems putting in the property, if there was domestic violence there as well. And they also just felt being able to talk openly and not having to hide about what they were experiencing was really beneficial. So I guess to summarise, the key findings from the project were that it was possible to identify children, albeit hard. However, as I stated in an earlier slide, there was still a recognition of needing to identify children earlier. So rather than children being provided support once a parent had actually come into contact with the police or children's services, they were trying to work toward more earlier interventions. No surprises, many families had complex needs, so that alongside the alcohol misuse, there was potentially domestic abuse, mental illness, and also other issues such as housing, benefits, as we're all very well aware of. From the children's perspective, they wanted to know who to speak to if they were worried about their parents drinking. They wanted to be able to talk to other people of similar ages and have some peer support so that they knew that they were not alone. And young people wanted to access services that focused on them as an individual, rather than, as I say, being defined by their parents' problems, and to kind of support them in their own right. The adults spoke about working with the fear of social services, and parents feared getting their children taken off them. That's already been touched upon multiple times throughout the conference. So it was really important to build trusting relationships to enable parents to openly talk about their needs. The bottled-up approach focused on a strength-based approach, which thought about the resources that kind of parents and families could draw upon, rather than just focusing on the risks. And they worked in quite an intensive way, but were really, again, acknowledging that it took a long time to build trust and rapport. And one of the other things that came out strongly, again, no surprises, that parents and children really needed support to rebuild their relationships between family members and to rebuild that trust. But I'll leave it there for now. I think I'm at time. So any questions?
Thank you very much again, also not only for your talk, but for your timekeeping. And we have, well, 2 to 3 minutes more left for questions. Yeah, please go to the microphone.
It's really encouraging, isn't it, that you can do those sorts of interventions that are almost light touch, and it's making me think about the potential for scalability. And then I was sitting there thinking about triage, and I'm thinking back to Bill Miller's, we were talking about Bill Miller the other day, Bill Miller's family checkup, which was the 3-session intervention. I'm thinking, you know, is it possible to have a service system that has a very brief intervention, something like Miller's family checkup, and then you either triage through or directly to an intervention like yours, and then for a proportion of families who are going to be non-responders to that intervention, you triage them to something, you know, in my world it would be PUP, but a more intensive family-focused approach. And that way you've got a kind of a tunnel, really, of services that are going to reach a much, much larger number of people. So I think, you know, this is as a sort of middle ground, as a fantastic first start, but wouldn't it be cool if our service system could have a little better triage?
Absolutely, and I think in response to that, because the team were commissioned by a local authority and they were in-house, or they'd seconded other people in, I think the flexibility almost to do that triage and it to be a really flexible approach that could kind of keep going back to the families was really influential and made a huge difference.
In your next study, it would be cool if you could actually document that almost as a triage process, and like who got the 3 sessions, who gets this, and who's referred on.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll bear that in mind.
Okay, so last opportunity for further questions. Ruth.
That the Bottled Up project was able to identify people who would otherwise not be going to services, and also to engage a good number of them. And I think it's not easier to engage people who are earlier on in their the journey in terms of the development of problems with alcohol. In fact, it can be much harder because they're sometimes harder to see. You concluded with an idea of earlier intervention for children. That seems like quite a tricky thing to do. What's your thoughts about what that might look like?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. So one of the follow-on pieces of work that's happened as a direct result of this was going back to the young people and asking exactly what that would look like. How do you get to these young people? So we worked with a number of young people to design posters and resources that would be displayed within the schools across the local authority area. They were given to kind of the early help workers and everything like that, so that professionals were just always mindful of thinking about that and trying to identify at an earlier stage, as I say, rather than, especially what was happening at the beginning of the project was children were only being identified once parents had got to a point of needing detox or rehab, or the police had been involved. So there was very much a push of developing resources that could be rolled out across the local authority area, and that's where it got to.
Okay, wonderful. We run out of time, so thank you all for being here, and you got 9 minutes to choose the next session, and see you later.